there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Monday, July 30, 2012. I want to reiterate my firm conviction that the world is on track for twin trouble this fall, unless God intervenes to stop the madness. Two hotspots need your utmost attention. A European bank panic, most likely starting in September, and a Middle East war, most likely in October or November. This isn't prophecy. It is simply my personal view based on events, trends, and statements published in leading journals. Let's start with the war. Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz reported that a top U.S. security official has briefed Israel on plans for a possible attack on Iran. According to the Israeli newspaper, U.S. National Security Advisor Mr. Tom Donilon sought to reassure Israeli officials that Washington is prepared to act militarily should diplomacy and sanctions fail to pressure Iran to abandon its nuclear program. The report said that Mr. Donilon detailed the plans to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a visit to Israel earlier this month. The Prime Minister's office would not comment on the story. Haaretz newspaper said the secret briefing was the most significant effort by high-level U.S. officials who had visited Israel in the past month. The report coincided with a visit to Israel by Republican candidate Mitt Romney, who was cheered by Israelis as he walked through the streets of Jerusalem. An unnamed senior U.S. official said Mr. Donilon told Mr. Netanyahu the Pentagon was planning for a possible decision to attack Iran's nuclear sites and had showed him some of the plans. He also revealed the U.S. military's ability to penetrate nuclear facilities buried deep underground. Russia sternly warned the USA, and EU that it will not permit Western nations to stop and search Russian ships sailing under the Russian flag, suspected by the West of transporting aid to the Syrian government. Meanwhile, Russian Navy Chief Vice Admiral Viktor Chirkov said Russian servicemen may be evacuated from the Russian naval base in Tartus, Syria, if the country comes under attack. And here's another clue pointing to a fall showdown. Russian Black Sea Fleet Commander Rear Admiral Alexander Fedoskin said that his warships will conduct war maneuvers in September. Now, are you old enough to remember JFK staring down Nikita Khrushchev over Soviet missiles in Cuba? Admiral Chirkov confirmed Friday that Russia is in talks with communist Cuba to construct a Russian naval base on the island 90 miles south of Florida. Do you think the Mac Daddy will stare down the Russians like JFK? No, he's disarming the country. The second hotspot for this fall is the European debt crisis. Perhaps I should say the socialist government's out-of-control deficit spending crisis. The world's financial system is in deep trouble largely because of the government spending more money on socialist welfare programs and war than they receive in tax revenue. Instead of curtailing government spending, they simply print more money and increase taxes. Is it any wonder the system is breaking apart? Somebody needs to put these monkeys back in the cages and throw away the keys. Little Timmy Geithner is in Europe today. He met with German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble, who interrupted his summer vacation to brief Timmy about the Eurozone crisis. Timmy and his entourage arrived in 3 black limousines at an elegant German hotel. Wait, there's an example. Why couldn't little Timmy ride in a taxi cab and stay in a reasonably priced hotel? Of course not. He's traveling on U.S. taxpayer money, and there's no limit to how much you can spend. After all, he was the president of the New York Federal Reserve, and he knows that it is just funny money. Now, there was no news conference today following the 6-hour meeting, and German officials quickly denied that the long meeting amounted to crisis talks, despite the dark storm clouds and heavy seas outside the hotel. Timmy Geithner's trip to Germany comes after Mario Draghi, head of the European Central Bank, vowed to do whatever it takes to save the euro. And that statement alone shows how dire things are in Europe. If the head central banker has to come out and say, I'll do whatever it takes to keep this thing from collapsing, that doesn't build a lot of confidence, does it? But what spurred Timmy Geithner's trip to Germany? Perhaps it was Mr. Schäuble's statement last Friday that Germany will not tolerate any more delays by Greece to cut its spending if Athens wants a bailout. And no doubt Spain's dire troubles is keeping Timmy up late at night, too. A leading European think tank, Open Europe, said Spain needs a $800 billion bailout really soon. Where are they going to get the money? Oh, by the way, the U.S. Postal Service will default this week on a $5.5 billion payment for future retiree health benefits. The payment is past due. It was due last year, 2011, but they got a delay until Wednesday, August 1st. And then the post office owes another $5.5 billion payment in September. That's $11 billion due on retiree benefits that the Postal Service can't pay. Investor Peter Schiff says the U.S. economy is on the verge of economic collapse, and it's far more dangerous than September 2008. He is warning investors to take immediate steps to protect their assets. Mr. Schiff, a frequent guest on True News, told Yahoo Finance, quote, "We have a much bigger collapse coming, not just the markets, but of the economy. It's like what you're seeing in Europe right now, only worse," end of quote. Mr. Schiff said things could start to unravel as early as this Wednesday when Federal Reserve bankster Ben Bernanke gives a speech in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Bankster Ben is expected to announce the start of QE3, funny money. Now, going back to my earlier remarks about twin trouble in the fall, Reuters news service said September is shaping up as a make-or-break month for European leaders to save the euro currency. It said September could be crunch time. A number of big decisions will be made in September, primarily around September 11 or 12. Germany's Constitutional Court will rule on September 12 on the legality of Germany's involvement in the EU bailout scheme. You know, this EU bailout mechanism doesn't even exist. It has no money. It only has pledges from countries that are too broke to come up with any real money. And then the Dutch will hold elections on September 12, the same day. And anti-EU bailout candidates are making a lot of noise and may win the election. Greece is trying to renegotiate the terms of its surrender to the international banksters. And Spain and Italy are sinking quickly into a black hole of debt and need a bailout. If you recall, the Times of London reported weeks ago that the IMF will cut off the bailout money to Greece by September 11 and set the stage for Greece to be booted out of the euro currency. So let's do the math. September 11, 1990, George Herbert Walker Bush gave his famous speech calling for a new world order. 11 years later, September 11, 2001, the Twin Towers fell in New York City. 11 years later, brings us to September 11, 2012. The European financial system will start to break apart sometime around that date. Is this the next stage in the Illuminist plan to destroy the global financial system and bring about their currency dedicated to Lucifer? So we have three sets of 11, 11, 11, 11, which equals 33, the highest degree in Freemasonry. My advice to you, be fully prepared for troubling financial turbulence on or after September 11 of this year. And I am hearing rumors that a major financial house may go under at approximately the same time. If you remember, Lehman Brothers was imploding around September 11, 2008. I'm hearing rumors that another financial house is coming down. And we have all these other scandals, the LIBOR, interbank lending rate. No wonder they call it LIBOR, because they're lying to everybody. The interest rates were rigged. And some major banks are under investigation. When you start adding up all of the people and companies and entities that could sue because the interest rates that they paid were rigged. I just think about the adjusted mortgage rates, millions of homes. I mean, we're looking at millions of lawsuits that could be filed in the coming year, trillions of dollars of damages. I mean, this thing is, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. But be prepared over the coming month. Be ready for the fireworks to start sometime around September 11 or 12 in the financial markets. That will set the stage for what they have to do next to take everybody's attention off the collapsing economic system, and that will be to start a big war in October or maybe early November. I am not convinced the Mac Daddy, Barack Hussein Obama, is going to leave the White House. Folks, it is a very dangerous time. I'll take a break. I'll be back in a minute.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast.
What keeps believers from reading God's Word every day? Dr. Stanley identifies one of the reasons in today's Moment with Charles Stanley.
Why is it that you don't read the Bible every day? Why is it that you put off your meditation daily? You say, well, you know, I intend to, I'm going to. You promise God you're going to. You promise your husband, your wife, your parents, your children, I'm going to do it. But you don't do it. Why don't you do it? You say, well, I guess I'm so busy. Let's just agree, busy is not the answer. Amen? 24 hours in every day, not any one of us have one more second in the day than anybody else. So time is not the issue. Getting around to this, not the issue. There is a reason we put it off. May I give you a suggestion of what one of them is? You are uncomfortable reading the Bible and spending time meditating before God because you get some very uncomfortable feelings. You say, well, I sit in an easy chair and there's nothing wrong. I'm not uncomfortable. Yes, you are. You're uncomfortable not on the outside but the inside. Because when you start getting quiet with God, just you and the Lord by yourself, and you begin to read the Scriptures and God begins to work in your life, and all of a sudden God begins to surface things in your life the truth is you don't want to deal with. And so you close it up. And what I want to motivate you to do is to find out, why don't you get in God's Word daily when the Bible says that's the way we to feed ourselves spiritually. That's where we get our sense of direction and guidance from God. Why don't we do it? It has nothing to do with time.
Welcome back to segment 2 of True News for Monday, July 30, 2012. I've got good news and bad news for American gun owners. The good news is that the UN gun grabbers failed again to reach agreement on a global treaty to regulate the sale, transfer, and ownership of firearms. 51 U.S. senators sent a letter to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton threatening to vote against ratification of the treaty if it did not recognize the Second Amendment right of American citizens to own and bear firearms. The treaty's contents recognize the right of the state to possess guns, but not necessarily citizens. The treaty did mention possessing guns for sports and recreational shooting, but failed to mention owning guns for personal protection or defense of liberty against tyrannical government powers. Furthermore, some people interpreted the treaty as giving the UN the power and authority to send international forces into a country to enforce the treaty. I've been reporting on the UN gun-grabbing treaty ever since our first broadcast in 1999. The good news is that it's dead for another year, but they will be back. Now, the bad news is that one of the most conservative members of the U.S. Supreme Court told Fox News on Sunday that the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution permits the possibility of gun controls. Justice Scalia said the extent of gun ownership will have to be decided in future court cases. The mass shooting in the Batman movie theater has re-energized the gun grabbers to push for more controls. Leading the charge is ultra-liberal New York Mayor Bloomberg, who not only wants to regulate guns, but also believes he has the authority to regulate the size of the soft drinks you purchase. Mayor Bloomberg says members of the U.S. Congress are terrified of the powerful gun lobbies in America. Well, I have on the telephone right now the founder and president of the most outspoken defender of the Second Amendment. I'm referring to my longtime friend, Larry Pratt, president of Gun Owners of America. Larry, how is life in Washington, D.C. right now?
I'm just having a ball terrifying people.
Well, great. I'm glad. I hope you're terrifying the Congress, reminding them how many members are in Gun Owners of America.
Well, Lord willing, I think they're getting the message that this is the third rail of American politics. And other than a few politicians from very, very uber-liberal districts, we haven't heard anything about we need more gun control. That's been mostly the chatter in the media, and that's not going to go anywhere. So I think we've been winning the debate. It's very encouraging that having been here at Gun Owners of America for over 3 decades, when something like this occurred early on, it was just pedal to the metal, back to the wall, playing defense the whole time. And now something like this happens, and it gives us an opportunity to point out that, you know what, we had gun control laws that were causing that. There was the ability of the theater to say no guns here, and you shouldn't be able to disarm people even on your own property. If you're open to the public, we're coming in armed unless you have some way of guaranteeing our safety. Stop disarming people. And that message, I think, is beginning to resonate. People understand that the police, try as they might, can't be everywhere. They can't be where the criminal is going to attack unless the criminal is just full of flat, dumb luck and the cop happens to be right there at the scene. The criminal acts alone unless we're able to protect ourselves. So I think a growing consensus is, oh, bless your heart, you have a sign that says I can't take a gun in here? Well, we'll see about that.
Larry, let's talk about this this UN gun control treaty that for right now is dead again. We know they'll be back.
Right.
They've been doing this for as long as I can remember. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because as of now it's a moot point. But what were some of the really alarming things that were in the treaty?
Well, they wanted a national licensing scheme. In other words, they wanted to know exactly who had a gun. They weren't interested in stopping crime. They know that licensing has never reduced crime, but it's a way for governments to know who has a gun so that when they think the time has come, they can go and grab the guns because they know where most of them are going to be. That was the primary problem with the treaty. It was just a complete destruction of the Second Amendment. They also thought that they could limit folks like you and me to reasonable firearms ownership, so that the government would be able to determine what firearms were not suitable for civilian ownership. And frankly, had something like that passed, which it never would in this country, there would have been massive civil disobedience. I'm not going to obey such a law, and neither is anybody else I'm talking to. If the government is that out of control, we need more guns rather than no guns.
I agree. That was the purpose of the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
The good news is 51 senators signed a letter, but the bad news is 49 senators didn't. I mean, that's scary. That only half of the Senate was willing to go on record saying to Secretary of State Clinton, don't push for this treaty.
I think had there been an actual vote, the number would have been even higher. But the good news is that's almost twice the number of votes we needed to kill it. And those that didn't...
Because a ratification needs 2/3 of the Senate.
Right, they'd have to get 67 votes. And if we have 51 of the 67 they need, it's a little tough for them to get to 67 that way out of 100. The fact of the matter is the American people have made it pretty plain to the politicians that this is not what they want, and the politicians increasingly are getting the message. Again, had something like this been before the Congress, the Senate, 30 years ago, we would have probably had senators willing to seriously consider signing the thing, and now they know better.
Had this thing passed, the UN, do you think the Mac Daddy Barack Obama would have signed it without ratification?
Well, he would have signed it, but it still would have had to have been ratified by the Senate. It doesn't go into effect unless they get those 67 votes. And frankly, that's an interesting question, and I think the president might have signed it even though it's politically toxic, because if you read a book like The Amateur, which is written by a kind of a middle-of-the-road guy, Ed Klein, former head of the New York Times Weekly Magazine, former foreign news editor for Newsweek, he went chapter and verse and shows you that the president deserves the appellation given him by Bill Clinton, the amateur. To put it more crudely and less kindly, he's a little bit stupid. He doesn't learn from his mistakes even, let alone does he have any comprehension for what the people are thinking and feel about. And so he just goes ahead and does what he wants. The biggest example, of course, is the economy, which he hasn't paid a nevermind to, but he did drive home Obamacare. So it's what he wanted because he was looking for control. If he can control the medical system in this country, he's got us by the throat. That's the central pressure point of the economy. It's a sixth of the economy, and if he can control who's healthy and who's not, then ultimately he has life and death in his hands. And that's what he was gunning for, if you will. And he didn't care about the rest. Too bad of those folks that are unemployed. Now he will control all of us.
Larry, what was your reaction when you heard Justice Scalia on Fox News yesterday opening the door to possible gun controls?
Disappointed but not overly surprised, because we've been aware. Well, if you go back and look at the Chicago McDonald decision of the Supreme Court, the only opposition brief or statement that was submitted by the justices that was Second Amendment in its literal original intent was by Justice Thomas. All of the rest, even if they were on the right side of the vote, nevertheless didn't have the right reasons for being there. They were not willing to say, we can't go there. Shall not mean be infringed means we ought to be impeached if we go there. And so Thomas has been the only one to say, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the rest of you guys ought to be impeached. That's essentially what he was saying.
Well, thank God for Justice Thomas.
Oh, my. And you know, I'm obviously not on this particular case, but on other cases, the the jury seems to be telling us, if you will, those that kind of have an ear to what's going on behind the doors of the court, that Thomas is having more and more of an impact. He doesn't participate in oral argument, doesn't ask questions, but apparently when those doors close, that's when he gets to work, and apparently he's increasingly a pretty effective lobbyist.
Larry, what are your thoughts about the horrible thing that happened in Colorado several weeks ago? Nobody talks about regulating Hollywood. Nobody talks about putting a clamp on Hollywood producing these vile, violent, bloodthirsty movies. But I was telling our radio audience for months something nasty, dark and nasty is going to be released in this country on July 20th with the Batman movie. I just looked at the trailer and knew this thing is dark and sinister.
Right. It doesn't take much to set off certain people that don't have a good moral compass. I would argue especially somebody is vulnerable if they are not a Christian, and this guy certainly was in that unhappy category. And so he, for whatever reason, I'm not aware of what particularly drove him to this mental state that he was in. But what we do know is that he thought killing people was perfectly within his right, if you will, to do. And I think that the way that kids are being educated in school now makes certain people vulnerable to the notion that they can go kill because, hey, we're just another animal, right? We're not a special creation of God. There's nothing significantly different about a human being.
Thanks to Darwinism, evolution, and abortion.
Exactly right. Abortion, which is simply a consequence of Darwin and something that he was quite in favor of. He was a eugenicist. He wanted to make sure that only certain the survival of the fittest occurred. And if you're looking for the survival of the fittest, then you're going to unsurvive the unfit. And so Darwinism is a philosophy or a religion, really, of death. That's completely in contrast, 180 degrees opposed to the Christian notion that life is created by God, is special, especially a human life, because we are made in the image of God. And Darwin thinks we're made in the image of what?
That's right. And so we have millions of young people who are deeply immersed in a culture of death through the entertainment industry. They're playing violent video games where for fun they're shooting people. They're watching violent, bloody movies and TV shows. They're listening to violent music. Everything in their culture that Hollywood and the entertainment industry is giving them is death. So why would we be surprised that they acted out?
And then at school, they're not allowed to be taught anything about Jesus Christ, and so they don't have any idea that a human being is special, that human beings have responsibilities to obey their Creator. If there's no Creator, there's no need to obey anything. So that strikes me as being the open door for anybody that happens to have a loose nut. There's no restraint that's going to be placed on that loose nut, and they're all the more likely to come right on off the bolt.
Larry, there was an eyewitness in the theater who saw somebody get up in the theater and open up the back door and leave it ajar. The police said there was no accomplice. Do you think that there's some discrepancies here in what is being reported and what isn't being reported?
Well, it's funny that the police would say that if this is what the eyewitness is saying. Why haven't they canvassed everybody that was in that theater that survived and asked them what they saw? Now, admittedly, eyewitnesses will tend to disagree. It's not the most reliable form of evidence, so maybe they didn't see it. Who knows? But why did the police say nobody saw anything? That's just simply not the case.
That's right. You think there are any discrepancies in the story that, as far as what you're hearing?
Well, before Fast and Furious, I would have said, look, if anybody thinks the government was somehow involved in this, black flag operation trying to create an environment in favor of the UN treaty or gun control of some other kind, I'd have said, come on, I don't go for conspiracies. But 400 dead Mexicans tells me that our government is willing to commit murder, and therefore, until we know for sure, we have to leave on the table the possibility that the government and or some other individual or group was connected to the shooter. We simply don't know. And if the government's telling us that there was nobody else involved when we know one person says they saw something else, then once again, who do I believe, that individual or the government? I think I'll go with the individual.
Mm-hmm. So various people have sent me photographs, and I don't know if these photographs have been photoshopped and altered. I don't know, and I don't have time to do the research on it. But various people sent me photographs showing this young man Holmes, his comparison of photographs as a student and then as the orange-haired Joker, and his facial features are different. One photograph, his nose is wide, the other one it's narrow. Again, I don't know if these photos have been photoshopped or if this is legit. But if it's legit, they're definitely not the same person, or he had cosmetic surgery done before he went on this shooting rampage.
I hadn't seen that, but that's very interesting. I had seen a picture. There was no way to know the context of the picture, but the supposed firearm that he was using, which we're told had a drum magazine, it was shown with a box magazine in it. Now, it could be that after that drum magazine jammed, that he might have inserted a box magazine. But if he had done that, then why did he not keep shooting? Why did he reportedly walk out of the theater at the time the gun jammed? Or did he? Again, another question that needs to be answered.
I agree. You mentioned Fast and Furious. The scandal is it ought to be putting people in prison, but we're not there yet. What is the latest that you're hearing in D.C. about Fast and Furious?
I would imagine that maybe sometime this week, or perhaps next week, the House of Representatives, under the direction really of Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa, will be filing charges as if they were the prosecutor, really, in the D.C. federal court against the Attorney General, saying that the Attorney General needs to be found in contempt of court for not having supplied documents requested by the Congress now having found him in contempt. If the court agrees with that submission, then the Attorney General will be demanded by the court to submit the documents. Now, my guess is that the Attorney General will not, that he will appeal that, even if the Congress is successful. My assumption is that that's a rather liberal court, and that they may not even agree with the House of Representatives. So at that point, somebody's going to appeal to the D.C. Court of Appeals for the Federal District Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, and there's probably an even shot that the court will say, this is a reasonable request. There are dead people. We don't know who knew what when. Cough up the documents. And at that time, if that happens, and this could all happen before the election, because it's a civil complaint as well as a criminal. The criminal probably won't get heard until next year, but the civil could be acted upon relatively quickly by the court. And if the court agrees with the House and orders the Attorney General to submit the documents, and he refuses, that's a jailable offense right there. The court could immediately have marshals go down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Department of Justice, go right on through electronic security, go right on up to the penthouse suite where the Attorney General luxuriates, and clap him in irons.
That would be a sight worth seeing. I'd
pay
pay a lot of money to see that, Larry.
You bet your life, if we could get a picture of that as it's happening, that picture would sell for millions. And I would try to raise it myself.
Larry, what is your hunch on the real purpose of Fast and Furious? I mean, look at if I even so much as sold a .22 pistol and took it across the Mexican border and sold it to a drug dealer, what would happen to me. I mean, ATF would come busting through my doors. I'd be surrounded by a SWAT team. That would be it. It's over.
Well, we don't even have to guess what motivated Fast and Furious. We have internal communication that whistleblowers submitted into the record, saying that, one of them, for instance, went from Mark Choate in the ATF bureaucracy to the head of the ATF office in Phoenix, where they were operating Fast and Furious, saying, do we have any of the Fast and Furious guns that have turned up in crime scenes? We'd like to use that as a predicate for more gun control. So the mystery is not there. We know exactly why they wanted to do this. And that sounds perfectly reasonable because Obama had fairly early on in 2009 had been talking to some anti-Second Amendment folks that had come in to lobby him for more gun control and to get moving on it. And he said, look, please be patient. We've got some things going under the radar that I think you're going to like. Well, it's no longer under the radar, but now we know what he meant by under the radar.
So do you think the paper trail is going to lead back to the Mac Daddy?
I think that's why Eric Holder has put himself in danger of going to jail in contempt of Congress. That strikes me. You don't invoke executive privilege unless you've got something that you don't want to be known. And what is being sought in this case is who knew what when. Well, maybe the president himself knew early enough on that it's his bad for not having stopped it and fired people. I think that's provable right now. We know that. But what we don't know is when did he first know about it and who else knew about it, who also, like the Attorney General, should have been dealing with it if they were honorable people and interested in protecting the public rather than appreciating 400 murders. And I don't say that without basis. When the head of the ATF, which is a department bureau within the Department of Justice, was being given weekly briefings showing the increase in the murder rate in Mexico, he expressed pleasure at what was happening. Pleasure because that was going to help make their case for more gun control.
They're sick. They're sick, Larry.
I can't imagine
a government policy,
being, especially an American. I can imagine a Nazi. I can imagine a Soviet. I can imagine somebody in Idi Amin's regime. But for an American to think it's cool and really helping to accomplish something, to deliberately create murder, whew, wow.
We have state-sponsored terrorism. That's what this is. Our government, the federal government in Washington, not our government. It's a regime now. It's out of control. It's absolutely out of control. It's corrupt. It's evil. And if the American people don't get control of this thing will control them.
That's right. That's what the election's all about. If we don't get rid of the president in this election, then if he's been willing to do this before his reelection, who knows what he might be willing to do when he doesn't have to worry about being reelected.
Well, he made a little joke a few months ago at some dinner where he said, my right-wing critics believe I have a conspiracy for my second term, a secret agenda. And then he said in this devilish, sinister voice, "You're absolutely right." And I don't think the guy was joking.
Well, and he had told the visiting delegation of anti-Second Amendment people, just give me a little room because I'm working under the radar. Well, if he's willing to say that before he's reelected, my, What do you suppose he's really?
That's what the microphones called him saying to outgoing Russian President Medvedev. He said, "Tell Vladimir Putin, just give me till after the election." What was he referring to? Dismantling the U.S. nuclear arsenal.
Exactly.
So he wants to disarm the nation militarily. He wants to disarm the nation with the guns of the citizens. The man is an enemy of the Republic. Larry Pratt, appreciate you being on True News. Larry, tell our listeners who want to join Gun Owners of America what they can do, how they can reach you.
We're at gunowners.org, and we would love for them just to go there at gunowners.org and get on our free alert list. We'll keep them posted on what's happening in Congress, and those alerts will come embedded with an email that they can use to send off to the appropriate member of Congress. We make it quick and easy to be a citizen lobbyist.
Listen, folks, if you've never joined a group like Gun Owners of America, but you really are worried about what's going on in this country, now's the time. This is it. This is the hour to join Gun Owners of America. Let Larry's mailbox fill up with new members. Larry, appreciate you being on True News.
I appreciate what you're doing with True News. Thank you so much, Rick.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
Well, 4 months ago, March 1st, I interviewed a former HSBC bank employee who blew the whistle on the bank's criminal money laundering operation on behalf of international drug cartels. My, how things can change in 4 months. HSBC today apologized for its failings over preventing drug cartels laundering money through its bank branches. The bank set aside $700 million to cover expected fines. The bank was criticized earlier this month by a U.S. Senate subcommittee for failing to prevent money laundering by drug dealers and terrorists. HSBC's chief executive officer, Stuart Gulliver, said the bank's involvement in laundering criminal money was shameful and embarrassing. Well, Mr. Gulliver, why don't you do the honorable thing and resign? Mr. John Cruz is the whistleblower who was on True News last March, and he's on the telephone now to give us his reaction to the HSBC admission of guilt. John, do you feel vindicated?
Not at all. Not at all.
You don't feel vindicated?
No.
Why is that?
Well, when I watched the interview, I watched the subcommittee interview HSBC, and I thought it was a total joke. These executives are the ones controlling the money laundering. They're not embarrassed about money laundering taking place at their bank. They're embarrassed because they got caught. But this is known throughout the industry. HSBC is a culture of fraud. They train their employees to commit money laundering, to work with money laundering. And there's a new wave of money laundering being done using the public's identity.
Mm-hmm. And the $700 million fine, really, that's peanuts to a bank the size of HSBC.
Back in 2009, I reported to the Suffolk County District Attorneys, which was also reported to Homeland Security. HSBC keeps $2 billion on the side to pay off regulators. But today, I just seen an article in the Telegraph that HSBC has $2 billion sitting on the side to pay off fines. Kind of a coincidence.
Really? That's in today's Telegraph?
That's in today's Telegraph. Yes, it is.
Well, and nobody is it appears that nobody's going to be indicted and sent to prison.
Don't know as of yet. I mean, I gave hours and hours of bank employees involved in money laundering know about it to the Internal Revenue. I filed a whistleblower suit against the bank with the Treasury Department. I filed a whistleblower complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commissioner. My attorney has received acknowledgement. So if they're going to be settling with the government, somebody's got to be going to jail, because what I have and there's a lot of things they have not seen yet implicates a lot of employees.
John, did the U.S. Senate committee call you as a witness?
No, they have not. did not speak to me, nothing.
Well, they already issued their report.
The only ones they're talking to are the executives, but the executives are covering up the money laundering when it comes to their involvement. They're not talking about nothing in the report about the executives being involved in money laundering. They're not talking about all the money laundering taking place using the public's identity. I mean, in my book, it talks about everything about using the public's identity. Now, this is a new way of money laundering. It's not going to stop. Not with this report coming out, not with paying their fines, which is really nothing. It's the cost of doing business. It's not even 5% of their profit.
John, do you think this so-called investigation, the U.S. Senate report, and Mexico's fine, and I don't know what Great Britain is going to do, if anything, but do you think that it's really just smoke and mirrors, that the governments are slapping them on the wrist, saying, "Hey, listen, too many people are talking about this. We got to give you a little public spanking, make it look like you've been caught"?
That is all it is. It's a little spanking. It's just to say, "Yeah, we're watching you," but we're really not going to do anything about it. We know you keep money on the side to pay the fines and everything, and it's not going to hurt your income at all. So we're not going to worry about it.
Well, I've been convinced for many years that many of the biggest banks in the world are nothing more than criminal enterprises run by mafia-like crime syndicates. What frustrates me and so many average citizens is, the government has so many strict rules on our money, the use of our own money. If I go to my local bank and deposit $5,000 cash because I sold a vehicle or something, the banker is required to send to Homeland Security and the IRS a suspicious activity report. If I go to my bank and withdraw $3,000 cash of my own money, I want it in cash, they have to file a suspicious activity report. But these big banks like HSBC, I mean, earlier it was Wachovia, they've been caught laundering billions of dollars for the drug cartels, but nobody goes to prison.
No, it's a reward for them. When they get caught and they pay a little fine, it's a reward to the executives. It's a reward to the bank. Why not do more of it? It's going to increase even more. If we're just going to pay not even 5% of our profit to the government for a fine, I'm going to launder more money. And I'm going to find out ways to get away with it even more after you come investigate us, because you're going to teach me what you're looking for.
Well, it's kind of like these little fines are kind of like a government criminal license fee.
Yes.
Pay the criminal license fee, and then you can go on and be a criminal again.
Yes.
Okay, John, on behalf of the listeners who did not hear your interview on True News March 1st, give them a brief synopsis of what your job was, where you were located, and what you personally witnessed going on inside HSBC.
My job was Vice President, Senior Business Relationship Manager. My job was to review accounts to know exactly where the money flow was going in and out of accounts, personal and business, to any business entity. I found money laundering in the hundreds and millions and billions of dollars all throughout the whole metropolitan area, all throughout the U.S., all throughout the world. Money laundering using the public's identity. I handed over thousands of accounts of attorney escrow accounts, attorneys who have hundreds and thousands of accounts of individuals that the bank used to launder money.
And give us some specific examples of how they were doing that.
Specific examples are putting money in accounts in America here, transferring out to business accounts, doing transactions to other countries but not knowing what country it's going to, not knowing what country it's coming from, using PayPal, using American Express for money transfers, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, doing return of deposits to accounts where the accounts never had deposits, $1 million, $1.5 million, $500,000. These were everyday ongoing to accounts, and thousands of accounts every day, which was millions and millions of dollars every day. And this was all money being laundered through the system, but they were using the public's identity, which they still are today, using the public's identity.
What do you mean when you say they're using the public's identity? What are you talking about?
Well, HSBC has a lot of data on people all across the world, millions upon millions of people. And if you have an account with them, a credit card, a mortgage, any kind of account whatsoever, they would create a fictitious account using your identity that you couldn't see, which was labeled as unidentified, and launder money through those accounts. So they were non-interest-bearing accounts, so they never get reported to the IRS. The bank controls the money going in and out of these accounts all around the world, and they're not doing the money laundering as far as anybody looking at the accounts. The individuals are. And there are many individuals getting W-2s for things that they've never had happen to them. There are many individuals getting statements, a PayPal statement. They never used PayPal. There are many people getting mortgages or loans that never had them because there's glitches in the system. There's always glitches in the system when you're trying to create something that doesn't exist.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that these banks like HSBC that have databases of millions of consumers are using their identification to create fictitious dummy financial accounts, which that customer knows nothing about, and they are running this money through those accounts, which keeps the bank absolutely clean because it's the person who, on record, was doing the illegal transaction. Is that what you're saying?
Welcome to the new wave of money laundering. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So there are people listening to us right now and who don't even know that their name and Social Security number, their bank account, their identity is being used by a major bank to move money around the world for a drug dealer.
Yes, this is international banking.
And so if the bank gets caught, they really can say, we didn't do it. John Doe did it.
Yes, that's exactly what they can do.
I wonder if any innocent people have been ensnared in this.
There have been many innocent people smeared in this. Read the complaints regarding HSBC online. You just Google complaints HSBC. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people are complaining about transactions that never exist. Having accounts overseas, international accounts that they have no acknowledgement. I mean, I got an email. My friends get emails saying, your international account is in full operation and overseas. What are you talking about? I don't have an account with you. This is what they send out to you.
John, are you aware of any other banks doing the same type of shenanigans?
Well, I don't know. I do know this. HSBC works at many banks when it comes to international money transfers. They work with all the big banks. Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They all work with HSBC. I mean, when I was working at HSBC, Wells Fargo can open accounts that I couldn't open up at HSBC, but Wells Fargo could open up those international accounts. I mean, I rejected an account that a customer wanted to open an international account because I felt that it was suspicious. They went directly to Wells Fargo and opened the account.
Oh, John, you mentioned PayPal. Do you believe that PayPal consciously is aware that its facilities are being used for money laundering?
Well, we have contacted PayPal because we put a news article out on WorldNet Daily, and we contacted PayPal. We contacted American Express, and neither one has contacted us back. They refuse to talk to us. They don't want nothing to do with talking about any illegal transaction.
Has anybody with any authority anywhere contacted you in the last 4 months since we talked?
Nobody has contacted me in law enforcement. I mean, we filed the SEC complaint, we filed the IRS. They did send letters saying they did receive the complaints. I mean, we sent information out to the Senate subcommittee months and months ago regarding all the information I have stated on the radio here. And still, none of them has even contacted me.
You mean Senator Carl Levin of Michigan, the chairman of that committee? He didn't contact you?
he was sent this information and he did not contact me.
Well, I'm not surprised. His job was to get the ruler out and crack the knuckles of the bankers. Bad bankers. Gonna smack your knuckles. Bad. Don't launder drug money anymore. Bad. So that's all it amounts to, John. The whole world is being run by criminal syndicates. It's out of control. It's just out of control. Everything's been taken over by crime. I mean, everything. Everything is a criminal syndicate now.
And as long as these criminal syndicates keep continue, there's an uprising coming, I feel, and I feel the world is going to be in a really bad place.
Yeah, dark ages are coming. Because these guys they're going to drive the whole system into insolvency. Their greed and immorality it's so rampant now, out of control, that they're going to take down the whole system because of what they're doing. Well, listen, I know you have you've got a book. If people want to read more about this, the book is World Banking, World Fraud, Using Your Identity, and you can get that at Amazon.com. And also, I think you have a website also, don't you?
I have a website, www.worldbankingworldfraud.com. You can go on and see many things that are in the news. You can see news interviews with certain individuals. You can read about a lot that's going on. But there's a lot more coming. All
right, worldbankingworldfraud.com. John Cruz. Thank you, John. Appreciate you standing up for the truth, and we pray that you'll be safe and that sometime somebody will take seriously the things that you know about. Thank you, John. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the End Time Newscast.
This is Max McLean. In times of distress, who will be there for you? Listen to the Bible from 2 Samuel 22. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded. He shot arrows and scattered the enemies, bolts of lightning and routed them. The valleys of the seas were exposed, and the foundations of the earth laid bare at the rebuke of the Lord. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. From 2 Samuel 22. Listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
Be able to hear the Word of God today and every day. Hear more at radiobible.org. That's radiobible.org.
A very big thank you to all the people who responded since last Friday in support of True News for the month of July. Thank you very much. Now, tomorrow is the last day of the month, and we're making great progress in our goal to pay all the outstanding invoices for this ministry by tomorrow, July 31st. I know we will reach our goal. The Lord has been faithful to this ministry for 158 consecutive months since our beginning in 1999. And He's not going to fail us now. If you would like to support us, please go to truenews.com and click on Donate for PayPal users. Our address is support@truenews.com. And if you want to call us to give us your bank card info over the telephone, the number is 772-569-8880. Checks and money order may be mailed to Post Office Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida 32969.